My name is Vanessa Hayes. Welcome to my studio. Today is Palm Sunday, so I thought we should paint some palm fronds. This is a very easy painting for any skill level. There is no right or wrong, and because we're doing this in a very loose style, it's very forgiving and a great opportunity to practice some basic brush strokes. Here are the supplies for today. A full list will be in the description. Before we get started on our painting, let's go over the basic brush strokes we will be using. I have the number 4 round, the number 8 round, and a number 1 rigger. Starting with the number 1 rigger, this brush will paint the thin lines of the branches. Make sure you have plenty of paint on your brush so it doesn't skip and cause broken lines. The next practice is with the number 8. I wet the background on the paper and then loosely brush in a watered down value. The wet paper will cause the paint to diffuse, creating a lovely background. Finally, the number 6 round will be used for detail. The brush stroke is very simple. We will use the tip to create a thin line connecting to the branch. Then apply pressure to the brush to spread the belly and paint the wider portion of the leaf. Then we will release the pressure as you get to the end of the stroke for the tip of the leaf. Now let's get started on our painting. I have taped edges and sketched a couple of arched lines in pencil where I want my main palm branches. I wet the paper using my spray bottle. Then using my number 8 round, I'm brushing the water around for full coverage on the page. We want the entire surface covered in water. And now we let the paper absorb some of the water. I'm adding more water and I'm spreading it evenly across the page. I'm also mopping up puddles from the valleys where the paper is buckled. We want the paper very wet so we can achieve a blurred background. With my number 8 brush, I'm putting some cerulean, dropping it in here and there, and mostly in the upper portion of the painting for some sky peeking through the palms. Next, brush on a watered down phthalo yellow-green. We want this color over the majority of the page. And I'm avoiding the blue areas. This is our lightest value and will be the base for our background. Phthalo yellow-green is transparent and will give us a lovely airy glow. I'm adding some directional strokes around my pencil lines to start to give the impression of some leaves. Because the paper is still very wet, we will not get any hard lines and we'll have a beautiful blurred background. Next, we're using a watered down sap green, and I'm brushing long strokes to give the impression of palm leaves. These strokes are completely random for the most part, but be more intentional with the shapes around the lines we drew for our branches. You might also change direction for some background branches for interest. The paper is still very wet, so everything is going to diffuse. You don't have to be too particular at this stage of the painting. Now I've mixed a stronger value of sap green using a heavier consistency. I'm adding random strokes in the background and more intentional strokes around the pencil lines. You'll notice how these leaves are holding more shape. As the paper is drying, these leaves will not be as blurry. This is how we will build on our layers. I'm adding some strokes of Cascade green while the paper is still wet to diffuse into the background and add some variety. The Cascade green has a blue tone which will add some interest. At this point, the brush strokes are still loose and random. The paper is starting to dry and not as wet, so the Cascade green is not dispersing as much as the sap green did. I'm being more intentional with the strokes of the Cascade green, centering around the branches. And now we let it dry. Sometimes I use a heat gun to speed up the drying process, but in this case, I want it to dry naturally and let the water and the paint work together to diffuse the paint. Using the dryer will stop this process. Now that it is dried, we can paint in our details. With the rigger, I'm painting the stem with Undersea green, following my pencil line. Undersea green is the darkest of the paint we're using today and will make the stems of the branches stand out. I'm giving a second pass on the stems to make them a little bolder. And now for the leaves. I'm starting on the main frond and I'm using the number 6 round. As we did on our practice, I'm starting with light pressure on the tip of the brush to connect the leaves to the stem. Then I'll press down on the brush to create the wider part of the leaf, and then release the pressure towards the tip for a nice clean point. I'm using a slightly darker tone than I did for the background. I'm also varying the size and length of the leaves. You'll notice I'm leaving a space between the leaves. We will fill that in later. This is the brushstroke we will use to complete the painting, so I've sped up the video. For interest, I'm picking up different greens. For these leaves, I'm using sap green, Cascade green, and Undersea green. Sometimes using the straight color and sometimes mixing them. And I'm varying the color of each leaf to give interest. Now I'm moving to the frond in the bottom corner. I'm using the same process, starting with light pressure to connect the leaves to the stem, adding pressure to the widest part of the leaf, and releasing pressure for the point of the leaf. I'm starting the leaves at the bottom of the page so that where it branches off, it will give it a natural look. Now that I have my first layer of leaves painted, I'm going back and adding more leaves in the gaps. I'm overlapping some of the leaves, curving some, and increasing the intensity of color as I add this layer. This process will create depth in your painting and also add more interest as we build on the layers. I like the look of the fullness of this leaf. and then just repeating the same process in the corner. I'm adding a few longer leaves on the frond in the center, as this is our focal point. I'm adding a few strokes to the left top corner, but I don't want much detail since this is the background and I don't want it to come forward. I'm adding a little detail on parts of the leaves that are attached to the branch to make sure the leaves are connected. I'm using Undersea green, which is the color we used for the stem. I'm also continuing to stroke up some of the leaves for continuity. I feel like the frond on the right was a little sparse, so I'm adding a few more leaves. And now I think we're done. Let's remove the tape and take a look at our painting with nice, clean borders. The paint bled under the tape, but that's an easy fix. Just dampen the corner of a magic eraser and scrub away the paint. If it doesn't get it the first time, go over a second time. And then just blot it dry. This painting was a simple exercise in water control using the wet on wet technique and wet on dry. We also used simple brush strokes to create our leaves. I hope you enjoyed this painting and will give it a try. If you like the painting, please give it a thumbs up. And if you have not already, please subscribe and hit the bell for notifications when the next video is up. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you soon.